You've gone after law firms because they've employed people you don't like, or they have represented people you don't like.
These are the biggest, most powerful lawyers. These are not people
you got a lot of leverage
easily intimidated.
As president, you got all the cards.
They paid hundreds of millions of dollars because they felt, I guess, they probably felt they did something wrong.
It was for survival, sir.
No, it isn't.
You're crushing their business.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. The targets of Donald Trump's revenge tour are faced with a major decision over and over again. Go along with what the wannabe autocrat demands and hope for the best, or stand your ground, hope the courts see it your way, and fight. When it comes to Trump's attack on the big law firms, we saw several firms take that first path, the path of appeasing Donald Trump in exchange for a social media post announcing a deal. Those deals in and of themselves have turned out to be moving targets up for interpretation, but it was a choice to avoid crisis by their telling. But according to brand new reporting in the Wall Street Journal, the firms who did not do that, the firms who did not bow to Donald Trump's petty, since ruled illegal and unconstitutional attacks, are now seeing business benefits for their political courage. Quote, support for the law firms that did not make deals has been growing inside the offices of corporate executives. At least 11 big companies are moving work away from law firms that settled with the administration, or are giving or intend to give more business to the firms that have been targeted but refused to strike deals. That's according to general counsels at those companies and other people familiar with those decisions. Among them are technology giant Oracle, investment bank Morgan Stanley, an airline, and a pharmaceutical company. Microsoft expressed reservations about working with a firm that struck a deal, and another such firm stopped representing McDonald's in a case a few months before a scheduled trial. We saw 9 firms reach deals with the White House in recent months. 4 firms fought back and sued. Of those 4, judges have struck down the orders against 3 of them, and 1 is temporarily blocked. Most recently, the judge who ruled against Donald Trump's executive order against the law firm WilmerHale, a judge appointed by George W. Bush, writes a scathing opinion that included 27 exclamation points. He wrote in part, quote, I have concluded that this order must be struck down in its entirety as unconstitutional. Indeed, to rule otherwise would be unfaithful to the judgment and vision of the founding fathers. So there are the legal victories in taking on the president. And now with this Wall Street Journal report, clear evidence of a business advantage, business victories as well. More from the Journal reporting, quote, in interviews, general counsels expressed concern about whether they could trust law firms that struck deals to fight for them in court and in negotiating big deals if they weren't willing to stand up for themselves against Donald Trump. The general counsel of a manufacturer of medical supplies said that if firms facing White House pressure, quote, don't have a hard line, they don't have any line at all, end quote. That is where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Voting rights attorney, founder of Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, is here. He's a former partner at Perkins Coie. Also joining us, investigative reporter for the New York Times, Mike Schmidt is here. Mike, you had the original reporting on the executive orders against the firms that capitulated and the ones that went to court and prevailed. And I guess my question for you, is there any remorse being communicated to you from the firms that went down and capitulated to Donald Trump?
Well, there have been consequences for those firms. So Paul Weiss just a week ago lost 4 of their top partners who decided to start their own law firm and to leave. And so that is a major consequence, because those lawyers had big clients and may take those clients with them. We know about dissent amongst associates. We know dissent amongst partners, about partners at Paul Weiss who didn't want Paul Weiss to do what they did. But this is an important story, because understanding the fallout from these deals was always going to take time. a firm like Paul Weiss insisted that they had no choice, that this executive order was existential, and that if they didn't reach the deal, they would have, essentially gone out of business or ceased to exist in the form that they're in. And what we're going to see in the coming months is whether that is true or not. In this instance, and what it looks like sort of early on here in the first few months, is that if you were a firm that fought, you were not only able to legally survive, but you were seen more favorably amongst fellow law firms and amongst companies. And I think that comes back to something actually very basic about lawyers and law firms, which is that if you want to hire a lawyer to represent you, you want them to be a zealous advocate for you, to do everything to advocate for you. And what people have seen in these deals, and what folks I've talked to in the legal community have seen and said, is that what the firms that made deals did was capitulation. They've even called Brad Karp, the head of Paul Weiss, they called it carpitalization, basically taking capitulation and Brad Karp's last name and combining them into two. So if you're an individual and you want to go out and hire a lawyer and you want someone to represent you, do you want someone that did a deal with Donald Trump and is on the hook for some sort of legal, pro bono legal work for the administration or for what Trump thinks he wants you to do it for? Or do you want someone that's going to fight? And there's some examples, like there is in this Wall Street Journal story, that people that are hiring lawyers want people that are going to fight.
Mark Elias, it feels like it is all that. It is all of the things that Mike describes in the legal world, but it feels like it's a democracy story as well. That not only does someone not want a lawyer whose very name is now become its own word that embodies cowardice and capitulation, someone who has always stood for and with Democratic politicians and priorities, who goes in on bended knee to the Oval Office. He has his own word, that individual. It's also turned out to be a terrible business bet. And that feels in some ways like as big or perhaps the bigger part of this Journal reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in addition to what Mike said, I had one more category, the judges. In some ways, I think it may be the judges that kicked this off, because judge after judge after judge that was called to review the lawsuits brought by the law firms that fought, not only faulted the administration, not only said that Donald Trump's executive order was unconstitutional and illegal, but were quite critical of the law firms that capitulated. So if you're out there looking for a lawyer, and you're looking to hire the best, and these folks are charging you $3,000 an hour, right? Are you going to pay someone that the judges are looking down on? Are you going to pay someone who's, maybe going to have to pull their punches against the administration? Are you looking for someone who will sacrifice being tough to save their own skin and make their lives a little easier? Or are you going to go with the folks who stand up and fight hard every single day and don't back down? And so it is a business story. It is a democracy story. The fact is that what Paul Weiss was counting on, what Brad Karp was counting on, is that in a news cycle where things move very, very fast, people would think it was distasteful what they did, but that it was smart, it was savvy, it was clever, and that in the end, the ends justified the means. And instead, they look like craven fools and gutless cowards, and it hasn't gone away. The stench of what they have done has not gone away. Here's the deal, Nicole. I was sued by Donald Trump for racketeering. I didn't back down. I fought. We won. He sicked John Durham and the rest of them after me, and I didn't fight. I didn't back down. I stood up. I told the truth, and I'm here to live to tell the tale. And when they went after law firms, then they mentioned me, and he gave a speech about me, and he issued an executive order that mentioned me. I issued a statement saying very clearly we would never negotiate with the White House. We would not pull punches in what we did, and who we represented was our business and not the White House's. And you know what? I haven't heard from them since.
I mean, Mike, is there something in here that the firms that capitulate can learn from? That if what they were seeking was to save their asses, they are completely exposed because Donald Trump smells their weakness, that they're in more danger now as law firms because even Donald Trump doesn't respect weakness.
I think that the way to look at it is that these firms agreed to what was essentially Truth Social posts, that they agreed to do pro bono legal work and agreed to represent people no matter their political persuasions. And Donald Trump put out pro bono social media posts that laid that out. Those deals do not have sophisticated contracts behind them that deal with, what happens if one party doesn't hold up their other end of it. And what is going to happen, and the question in the legal community is that if Trump tries to call in that pro bono legal work, what is going to happen? We have already seen, based on Trump's public statements, that he has one understanding of the deal. He has said that the pro bono legal work can be used towards trade. It can be used towards the coal industry, and it may be able to be used for his own personal legal representation. And we haven't seen examples yet of Trump call into those firms to activate that yet. But what it does is that it puts a firm like Paul Weiss in a situation where Trump could call them up and ask them and lean on them to basically come good on the commitments that they have made, or come good on what Donald Trump thinks the commitments they have made. And at that point, they will have no recourse. See, the firms that went to court and that fought got judges to step in and issue orders that protect them from the executive order. But if you're Paul Weiss, all Donald Trump has to do is dust off the old executive order and sign it again and put a new date on it, and it will be in effect. And at that point, someone like Paul Weiss would be back at square one and would have to decide whether to make another deal or go back to court. And so we haven't really seen the next act in this story yet, where we get a sense of what are these deals going to mean? Are they truly hollow deals that included a lot of platitudes in Truth Social posts, or are they things that Donald Trump is going to call in on? And the firms that made the deals are living every day in that situation where Trump could turn to them. And if they have already made deals, what would they do if Trump asked them, okay, time to show me your pro bono legal work?
I